Every single person on Earth carries the wildfire virus. When you die, you come back. That's not just America's problem, that's everybody's problem. But while we've spent over a decade watching Georgia, Virginia, and Texas fall apart, the franchise has quietly built out what happened beyond US borders. Today we're breaking down the 6 countries the Walking Dead universe has actually explored, and some of them might surprise you. Canada, here's the thing about the Walking Dead universe that people forget. The wildfire virus doesn't care about borders. Every living human on Earth is already infected, and when they die, they come back. Every country, every continent, every remote island village, nobody got a pass. But while the franchise has spent over a decade showing us what happened to America in excruciating detail, it's also quietly dropped breadcrumbs about the rest of the world. 6 countries outside the US have actually been explored in some meaningful way across the comics, shows, games, and novels. Some got entire spin-off series. Others got a single line of dialogue and a whole lot of silence. Canada is firmly in the silence category. You'd think Canada would be a goldmine for zombie apocalypse storytelling. Massive landmass, freezing winters, low population density outside a handful of major cities. Every fan has floated the theory that Canada would be the safest place to ride out the end of the world. Walkers slow down in the cold, thousands of miles of empty wilderness to disappear into. Sounds perfect on paper, but the franchise refuses to confirm any of it. What we actually get is this. The Walking Dead All-Stars, a mobile game, is partially set in Ontario. The Clementine graphic novel continuity acknowledges Canada as a real inhabited place with survivors. And in Fear the Walking Dead, Season 1, a survivalist named George Geary briefly mentions Canada while rattling off the fates of North American nations. His tone implies Canada got hit with the same drastic military response and urban devastation as the United States. Bombings, quarantine failures, cities going dark, but that's it. No named cities, no described government collapse, no confirmed safe zones, nothing. And that silence is clearly intentional. The writers have had over a decade and dozens of spin-offs to flesh out Canada, and they've chosen not to. They've kept it as a narrative blank check, a country they can cash in whenever they need a new setting without contradicting anything established. You can't retcon what you never wrote, so Canada sits in this weird liminal space where it canonically exists, canonically has survivors, and canonically got devastated, but nobody will tell you how bad it actually is. But if Canada is the country The Walking Dead refuses to talk about, China is the one it couldn't stop talking about once it started. China. If you want to know what the absolute worst version of the zombie apocalypse looks like, you don't need to imagine it. Someone already wrote it down. Wesley Chu's novel The Walking Dead, Typhoon, is set entirely in China, roughly 6 months after the outbreak, and it is canon, officially part of the Walking Dead universe, and it paints a picture that makes Georgia look like a mild inconvenience. Here's the math that makes China a nightmare. Pre-outbreak. It was the most populous country on Earth. Every single one of those people carries the wildfire virus. Every person who dies, for any reason, comes back. So when infrastructure collapses and people start dying in waves, you don't get scattered hordes, you get a tsunami. The title itself, Typhoon, isn't just a cool word. It's a metaphor. The dead move through China like a natural disaster, wiping out everything in their path with the force of pure, unstoppable numbers. The novel follows 3 survivors navigating Hunan province. Zhu, a villager who left for the city of Changsha before everything went sideways. Elena, another Chinese survivor. And an American expat who picked possibly the worst time in human history to be living abroad. Changsha, a city of millions, becomes essentially unsurvivable. Endless waves of walkers filling every street, every building, every alleyway. The survivors find refuge at a settlement called The Grove, a community nestled in a valley near the village of Fengyuan that uses natural geography as its primary defense. Mountains and choke points instead of walls. But here's the detail that genuinely sets Typhoon apart from anything else in this franchise. The survivors don't call them walkers, they don't call them biters, or roamers, or lurkers, they call them jiangshi, pronounced roughly jiangshi, which comes directly from Chinese folklore about hopping vampires and restless corpses. This is one of the only times in the entire Walking Dead universe where the undead get a name that already existed in the culture. Everyone else had to make something up. China already had a word for this. The novel also introduces factions like the Heaven Monks, a quasi-religious group whose member Lao Po represents how spiritual frameworks rush in to fill the vacuum when the state collapses. New hierarchies of violence and sacrifice, justified by faith instead of politics. It's bleak. Fans have been begging for a screen adaptation of Typhoon for years, and honestly, it's criminal that we don't have one yet. But if you think China's situation sounds hopeless, wait until you hear what France has been doing. Because France didn't just suffer the apocalypse, they might have caused it. France didn't just suffer the apocalypse. There's a very real chance France caused it. Let me explain. In the post-credits scene of World Beyond Season 2, we see a French research facility. A scientist walks in and starts watching old footage of Dr. Edwin Jenner from the CDC in Atlanta, the same guy who nearly blew up Rick's group back in Season 1. Then an armed man enters, looks at her, and says the 2 sentences that changed the entire franchise. You started this. And then even better, you made it worse. That's not a theory. That's not a fan interpretation. That is a character on screen directly accusing French scientists of creating or catastrophically modifying the wildfire virus. The scene also references international research teams called Primrose and Violet, establishing that France was a key node in a global scientific network grappling with wildfire before the outbreak. But France appears to be where it all went sideways. For years, Robert Kirkman dodged every origin question with his famous space sport joke, basically telling fans to stop asking. Then World Beyond dropped the scene and blew the whole thing wide open. Some fans loved it, others preferred the unknowable cosmic dread. I don't know what to tell you. France got the finger pointed at it anyway. But here's where it gets worse. France isn't just the country that probably started the apocalypse. It's also the country that made the zombies significantly more lethal than anywhere else on Earth. The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon shows us a France crawling with walker variants you won't find in Georgia or Virginia. First, there are burners, walkers whose touch or bodily fluids cause severe chemical burns on contact. Isabel tells Daryl that burners are just one kind of zombie in France, which is a casual way of saying the undead ecology there is a nightmare buffet. Then there are the ampers. Dr. LaFleur's serum gets injected into a walker and briefly restarts the heart and circulatory system. The result is a walker with superhuman speed, superhuman strength, actual intelligence, and the ability to hunt other walkers. These are the most capable walkers in the entire franchise, not the Whisperers, not the Climbers, Ampers, made in France, like a horrifying wine nobody asked for. And on top of all that, France's political landscape is a mess. The Power of the Living is a nationalist paramilitary group that abducts boys and turns them into child soldiers. Opposing them is the Union of Hope, a resistance network operating under the motto, Truth is Hope. So you've got a country that probably started the end of the world, definitely created its most terrifying zombies, and is now tearing itself apart politically, while surrounded by walkers that can burn you alive or outrun you. Cool. That's also a thing that happened. But if France sounds bad, wait until you hear what happened south of the American border. Mexico. Mexico is the franchise's most politically grounded international setting, and it's not even close. While other countries get a mention or a post-credits tease, Mexico gets entire seasons of Fear the Walking Dead dedicated to showing how a nation fragments when the rules disappear. Seasons 2 and 3 are set primarily in Baja California, and what they reveal is a masterclass in how the same apocalypse produces radically different societies depending on what resources and beliefs happen to be lying around. But first, one detail nobody talks about enough. Mexico attempted to seal its border with the United States as an emergency response to the outbreak. One of the only explicit national-level policy decisions in the entire franchise, and it's Mexico trying to keep Americans out. The irony writes itself, but it was always going to be futile. Wildfire lies dormant in every living human regardless of nationality. You can't build a wall against something that's already inside everyone on both sides of it. The virus doesn't care about your passport. It's basically the geopolitical equivalent of locking your front door while the fire is already in the kitchen. Once that federal response collapses, which it does almost immediately, Baja California fractures into microstates, and this is where it gets fascinating. First, La Colonia, a hillside survivor community overlooking Tijuana, led by Alejandro, who claims he was bitten and survived. He wasn't, that's a lie. But his people believe him, and that manufactured miracle becomes the foundation of a quasi-theocratic society. Their signature move is using walkers as a living perimeter wall, literally herding the dead into a barrier around their settlement. Outsiders see a wall of corpses and turn around. Residents see divine protection, it works right up until it doesn't, which is, the trajectory of most cults. Second, the Abigail family vineyard near Valle de Guadalupe, a walled agricultural estate run by Celia Flores, operating like a feudal manor. Celia treats walkers almost as family members who've simply transitioned to a different state. The vineyard has walls, food production, and a clear hierarchy. It's feudalism with better wine. Pre-apocalypse wealth translates directly into post-apocalypse power. Third, the Gonzales Dam on the Tijuana River, Whoever controls the dam controls the water supply for every community downstream. That's not ideology, that's not theology, that's just leverage. You don't need to convince people your leader is immune to bites when you can just turn off their drinking water. And threading through all of this are groups like Los Hermanos, a cartel remnant dealing in murder and robbery out of Tijuana. Because, of course, the cartels adapted. They were already organized, already violent, already territorial. The apocalypse didn't create new power structures in Mexico so much as it stripped away the ones restraining the old ones. What makes Mexico's portrayal so effective is that it's not one story. It's three completely different answers to the same question. How do you build a society when everything falls apart? You build it around faith, around land, or around infrastructure, theocracy, feudalism, or resource control. And none of them are stable, because they're all built on foundations that can be taken away. But if you think Mexico's fragmentation is complex, wait until you hear about what happened in Spain, where the apocalypse gets personal for the Grimes family in a way nobody expected. Rick Grimes wakes up from a coma in a hospital in Georgia, and at almost exactly the same time, a museum curator named Jeff is waking up on scaffolding in the middle of Barcelona. One of them will reshape civilization, the other one won't make it out of the city. Here's the thing about The Walking Dead. The Alien. Most people who've watched every episode of the show, played the games, binged the spin-offs, they have zero idea it exists. The entire story lives inside a single 27-page comic set in Barcelona. It's the first Walking Dead comic ever set outside the United States, and the first one not written by Robert Kirkman. Brian K. Vaughan wrote it, Marcos Martin drew it, and it quietly contains one of the most devastating storylines in the entire franchise. Jeff is an American working as a museum curator in Barcelona when the outbreak hits. He wakes up to screaming. A kid is being torn apart in the street below him. Within hours, the city is gone. Not struggling, gone. European urban density turns out to be a spectacular disadvantage when every dead person stands back up and starts biting. Jeff meets a woman named Claudia, and together they try to fight their way out. They scavenge, they run, they do all the things you'd expect two people to do when a major metropolitan area becomes a buffet. Claudia tells Jeff she's trying to reach a boat so she can sail to America, but Jeff gets bitten, and instead of giving up, he sacrifices himself so Claudia can escape, holding off walkers while she gets to the water. He dies in Barcelona, alone, buying time for someone else's survival with the last minutes of his own. That sacrifice is genuinely one of the most heartbreaking moments in the franchise. An ordinary guy, not a sheriff, not a soldier, just a curator who liked old art, choosing to die so a stranger can have a chance. No dramatic last stand with a machine gun, no heroic speech, just a bitten man swinging a weapon until he can't anymore, in a foreign city with nobody left who knows his name. The comic doesn't even give you a proper goodbye, it just ends, which is, not ideal. But Spain doesn't stop at Jeff. The Walking Dead. Daryl Dixon moves its setting to Spain for seasons 3 and 4, with Barcelona and other Spanish locations hosting new conflicts that connect French and Spanish survivor networks. After 2 seasons navigating monasteries and faction wars across France, the story pushes south into Iberia, using Spain's historical architecture as a backdrop for an expanding European storyline. The shift positions the country as a recurring geographic hub rather than a one-off tragedy. What makes this exciting is the possibility that the Daryl Dixon show could reference Jeff's story. A mention of an American who died in Barcelona during the early days, a journal entry, a grave marker. It probably won't happen because the TV continuity has always kept the comics at arm's length. But the fact that Daryl is literally walking through the same city where Jeff bled out is the kind of coincidence that keeps people theorizing. But if Spain gave us one of the franchise's most intimate tragedies, the next country on our list gave us something nobody expected, a success story. And I'm not being sarcastic. United Kingdom. Every single country we've covered so far has fallen. Canada is a ghost. China drowned under the weight of its own population. France literally made the virus worse on purpose. Mexico's border policy was dead on arrival. Spain became a graveyard for a Grimes brother nobody even knew existed. But the United Kingdom didn't fall. And I need you to understand how insane that is in this universe. Because according to Angus and Fiona, a Scottish couple from the comics, the British military locked the islands down during the very onset of the outbreak. Ports, airports, the Channel Tunnel, all of it, sealed, armed checkpoints at every entry point. The army moved fast, moved hard, and turned an entire island nation into a fortress. Here's the thing. The UK had one advantage no continental country could replicate: water. France shares open borders with half of Europe. China has 14 neighboring countries, but Britain is surrounded by ocean, and when the dead started walking, that ocean became the most effective wall in human history. You don't need to build fences when the English Channel is doing the job for you. Now, before you start imagining tea parties and functioning post offices, the canon is clear that this was not a utopia. Large areas were still lost, cities fell, people died. And here's the part that makes it feel like a ticking time bomb. Wildfire is dormant in every living human. Every person in Britain already carries the virus. Every heart attack, every car accident, every grandma who passes in her sleep, that's a new walker. The military didn't beat the virus. They just bought time against the external pressure while the internal clock kept ticking, but they bought enough time. And that's what separates the UK from literally everywhere else. Think about what a functioning post-apocalypse state actually means. A standing army, supply lines, some form of governance coordinating checkpoints across an entire country. In a world where the biggest communities in the US are a few hundred people hiding behind walls made of sheet metal, a nation-state still operating with military discipline is almost alien. Survivors in France or America would hear rumors about Britain the way medieval peasants heard rumors about distant kingdoms, this mythical place across the water where the lights are still on, which is, not ideal for your morale when you're eating squirrel for the third week in a row. But here's what the franchise actually got right. They never showed us the UK in detail. They told us it survived, gave us just enough to believe it, and left it alone. Because the moment you put cameras inside a functioning post-apocalypse Britain, you undermine the entire thesis of The Walking Dead. The show works because there's no cavalry coming, there's no government to call. If you show a country where all of that still exists, you break the tension for every other storyline. So the UK lives in the background, a whispered exception that makes the rest of the world feel even more hopeless by comparison. And honestly, when you zoom all the way out, that's what makes this entire topic so fascinating. From Canada's deliberate silence to China's demographic catastrophe, France's scientific horror, Mexico's fractured borderlands, Spain's personal tragedy in Barcelona, and the UK's impossible survival, every country faces the exact same virus, the exact same rules. Every human is infected. Every death creates a walker. But the response is completely different every single time, shaped by geography, by culture, by luck, and by the specific kinds of people who happen to be in charge when everything goes wrong. The Walking Dead spent over a decade telling stories in Georgia and Virginia, but the world it built stretches across every continent, and most of it is still unexplored. Entire civilizations rose and fell while Rick Grimes was arguing about farming. The franchise still has vast, untold territory ahead of it. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.